Her mother-in-law gave her a pair of worn-out used shoes on her birthday, while gifting gold jewelry to her other daughters-in-law. At first, I laughed it off, but what happened after still burns inside me. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was my 29th birthday, and the whole Johnson family was gathered in the living room. Margaret, my mother-in-law, loved making a show out of family events, so everyone was there. Ryan's brothers, their wives, even a few cousins. She always liked to be in charge, and when it came time for presents, she made sure all eyes were on. I sat there smiling, waiting to see what she had chosen for me. I didn't expect anything grand, but I didn't expect what came next either. She handed me a box that looked like it had been used before. The wrapping paper was wrinkled, the tape barely sticking. I pulled it apart, trying to stay polite, and inside was a pair of shoes. Not just any shoes. Scuffed leather flats with the soles worn thin and creases across the front. They weren't new. They weren't even clean. When I lifted them out of the tissue paper, I caught the faint sour smell of someone else's feet. The room went quiet for a second, and then laughter broke out. Samantha and Chloe, my sisters-in-law, covered their mouths as if they were trying not to laugh too hard. Margaret chuckled and said, "They still have some life in them, don't they? Better than letting them go to waste." Her words were sharp, but she said them with a smile, as if she was doing me some kind of favor. Before I could even process it, she reached under the table and brought out 2 velvet boxes. She handed them to Samantha and Chloe with a dramatic flourish. They opened them to reveal gleaming gold bracelets, the kind that caught the light and made everyone gasp. "For my beautiful daughters," Margaret said, pulling them into a hug like they were the center of her world. I sat there with the used shoes in my lap, my face burning. I forced a small smile because what else could I do? I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. My fingers tightened around the shoes, and I kept my head down so nobody could see the sting in my eye. Ryan was sitting beside me the whole time. I waited for him to say something, to stand up for me, to at least point out how wrong it was. But he stayed silent. He gave me a weak smile, the kind that said, "Just ignore it." His silence hurt worse than the shoes. It felt like I was completely alone in that room. Everyone went back to chatting and laughing, admiring the bracelets, while I sat quietly. I tried to push the shoes back in the box, but the smell clung to me. That smell, mixed with the sound of their laughter, is something I'll never forget. It was the moment I realized that in this family, I was never going to be treated like one of them. And what hurt most of all was that my husband, the man who promised to protect me, just let it happen. After that birthday, I tried to tell myself it was just one bad moment, that maybe Margaret hadn't meant it the way it came across. But I learned quickly it wasn't a one-time thing. The more time I spent around the family, the more I saw the pattern. Samantha and Chloe could do no wrong. They were always showered with compliments and expensive gifts. Margaret would call them her perfect girls, showing off what she bought them as if they were trophies. Every family gathering became a reminder that I didn't belong. Samantha would hold up a new necklace, or Chloe would flash another gold bracelet, and Margaret would beam with pride. When it came to me, she barely looked in my direction. If I wore something nice, she'd find a way to cut it down. Once, I wore a dress I had saved up for, and Margaret said in front of everyone, "That color makes you look washed out." Samantha could pull it off, though. My smile froze, and I pretended not to care, but inside I was shrinking. It didn't stop there. My cooking was another easy target. I once spent the whole day preparing a dish for Sunday dinner, hoping to impress her. She took one bite, set her fork down, and said, "Too salty." Not like Chloe's cooking. She always knows how to season perfectly. Everyone else ate without complaint, but her words stuck in the air. It didn't matter how much effort I put in. I was never enough in her eyes. My job was another sore spot. I worked full-time, long hours, and I also helped Ryan with bills. But Margaret treated me like my career was a joke. She'd say things like, "It must be nice sitting at a desk all day, not having to work as hard as Samantha. She takes care of her household so beautifully." The implication was always clear. I wasn't a real wife in her eyes, just someone taking up space. The worst part was Ryan's reaction. I'd try to tell him how much it hurt, how every little comment chipped away at me. He'd sigh and say, "Just let it go, Emily. That's how she is. Don't make it into drama." His words were like a wall. No matter how much I tried to make him see, he didn't want to. He wanted peace, even if it came at the cost of my dignity. With every dinner, every remark, the gap grew wider. Margaret's favoritism wasn't hidden, it was deliberate. Samantha and Chloe basked in it, enjoying the spotlight, while I sat on the sideline. At first, I tried to laugh it off, to convince myself I was overthinking. But deep down, the resentment began to build. It wasn't just about gifts or praise anymore. It was about being made to feel less than day after day, while the man who promised to stand by me acted like it was nothing. I could feel something changing inside me. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew I couldn't keep swallowing. Thanksgiving came, and I had been dreading it for weeks. Margaret always made the holiday a spectacle, inviting the whole family and setting the table as though she were hosting royalty. I walked in with Ryan, carrying a pie I had baked, hoping maybe if I contributed something, things would go smoothly. But the moment I stepped through the door, I felt that same tightness in my chest I always did in her house. Dinner started out with the usual chatter, everyone complimenting the food and laughing at small stories. I tried to relax, to blend into the background, but Margaret never let me forget where I stood. She leaned across the table during a lull in the conversation and said, "Emily, you really are the thrifty one, aren't you? I've never met anyone who can stretch $1 quite like you." Her tone was sharp under the sweetness, and I knew what she was really saying, cheap. I laughed nervously, trying not to make it awkward, but she wasn't done. She looked around at everyone and added, "Ryan must be so grateful. With his paycheck, it's a miracle you two manage it all." My stomach dropped. I knew for a fact I made more than Ryan, but she twisted the truth to make me seem like I was living off him. The words cut deeper than she knew, because they weren't just digs, they were lies. Everyone at the table chuckled politely, not knowing what else to do. Samantha and Chloe smirked into their wine glasses, enjoying the show. I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, wondering if anyone would step in. I turned to Ryan, silently begging him to speak up. But he just looked down at his plate, chewing slowly, as if he hadn't heard a thing. Then Margaret took it further. She reached across the table, grabbed my wrist, and held it up for everyone to see. "Look at this," she said with a laugh, turning my arm this way and that. "Not a single bracelet, not even a chain. Bare as can be. Now look at these two." She pointed at Samantha and Chloe, who eagerly stretched out their arms, wrists sparkling with layers of gold. That's what a woman should look like. A little shine, a little worth. The table erupted in laughter again, but for me, everything blurred. My cheeks burned so hot I thought I might cry right there. I pulled my wrist back quickly, hiding it under the table, wishing I could disappear into the floor. My pie sat untouched at the end of the table, and I hated myself for even bringing it. Ryan didn't say a word. Not one. He could have defended me, told them I worked hard, reminded them that I wasn't living off him. Instead, he sat there, his silence louder than Margaret's voice. That night, as I replayed everything in my head, something inside me shifted. I knew I couldn't keep being their punching bag. If Ryan wasn't going to stand up for me, I would have to stand up for myself. Quietly, without saying a word to anyone, I started planning. A week after Thanksgiving, we were back at Margaret's house for another family dinner. I tried to keep my head down, helping set the table and carrying dishes into the kitchen. The house was buzzing with conversation, and for once I thought maybe I'd get through the night without being the target. But sometimes the truth doesn't wait for you to be ready. I had just placed a tray of glasses on the counter when I heard voices from the other side of the kitchen doorway. Samantha and Chloe were in there alone, their tones light and gossipy. At first, I didn't pay attention, but then I heard my name. "She really doesn't care about Emily," Chloe whispered with a laugh. "Margaret told me she doesn't want to waste money on her, because she's not really family." Samantha chuckled. "Yeah, she said the same thing to me. I mean, look at the shoes she gave her. That wasn't an accident." She wanted to make a point. I froze, my hands gripping the counter so tight my knuckles went white. Their voices were clear, every word slicing into me. "Margaret actually said Ryan could have done better," Chloe added, her voice full of amusement. "She thinks Emily is plain compared to us." The two of them burst into laughter, the kind that made my stomach twist. They weren't just repeating Margaret's words. They were enjoying them, feeding off them like it was entertainment. I stood there, hidden just out of sight, my heart pounding in my chest. Every small insult, every little slight I'd brushed off suddenly made sense. It wasn't thoughtlessness, it was deliberate. Margaret didn't see me as part of the family, and she never would. She had been humiliating me on purpose, and the others had gone along with it. The shock burned for only a moment before it shifted into something heavier, hotter. Anger. Not the loud, reckless kind, but a steady fire in my chest that grew with every laugh I heard from them. They thought I was powerless, that I'd just keep taking it quietly. I wanted to burst in, to scream at them, to throw their words back in their faces. But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed the urge and stepped back, moving silently down the hall as if I'd never been near the kitchen. I forced my face into a calm mask before walking back into the dining room. Nobody knew what I'd just heard. Inside, though, I knew everything had changed. My heartbreak was gone, replaced with a clear understanding. This wasn't about me being sensitive. This was about them deliberately cutting me down piece by piece. That night, lying in bed beside Ryan while he scrolled on his phone, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. I wouldn't rush into a fight. I wouldn't give Margaret or her favorites the satisfaction of watching me crack. No, I would be patient. I would be smart. And one day, when the time was right, I would make sure they knew exactly who they had underestimated. After hearing what Samantha and Chloe said in the kitchen, I knew I couldn't keep living the same way. I needed something of my own, something that would give me strength no one in that family could touch. So I started setting aside money from my paycheck. It wasn't much at first, just a little here and there, small amounts Ryan wouldn't notice missing from the joint account. I opened a separate account in my own name and watched the balance slowly grow. Each dollar felt like a piece of armor I was building for myself. At work, I confided in Daniel, a coworker I trusted. He was older, smart with money, and had experience in property. I didn't give him all the details about my family, but he could tell I was serious about wanting independence. He told me about a small opportunity, an investment in a modest property that needed fixing up. Nothing flashy, nothing anyone in the Johnson family would brag about, but steady. Something I could build on. The first time I signed paperwork with Daniel guiding me, my hands shook. But it wasn't from fear. It was from excitement. For once, I wasn't just waiting to be humiliated. I was creating a future for myself. Every time I transferred money into that account or made another small payment toward the property, it felt like a secret victory. At home, though, I made sure no one suspected a thing. Around Margaret, I played the part she expected. I smiled politely when she handed Samantha and Chloe new gifts. I nodded when she made remarks about me not measuring up. I even laughed when she mocked me, just enough so she wouldn't think I was plotting anything. She believed I was too quiet, too weak to ever push back. That belief was my cover. Ryan noticed I was calmer than before, but he didn't question it. He thought I had finally taken his advice to let it go. In reality, I was letting nothing go. I was storing everything. Each slight from Margaret, each smirk from Samantha and Chloe, went into a box in my mind. I didn't cry over them anymore. I collected them, one by one, as fuel. When I cooked a meal only for Margaret to insult it, I smiled and thought about the money waiting in my account. When Samantha flashed another necklace, I nodded politely while picturing the property paperwork tucked away in my drawer. When Chloe laughed about some comment Margaret had made about me, I laughed too, but inside I thought about how none of them had any idea what I was building behind their backs. The more they underestimated me, the stronger I felt. They thought I was stuck, dependent on Ryan and desperate for approval. But with every insult, I worked harder, saved more, invested wisely. One day, I knew I would no longer sit quietly at their table feeling small. One day, they would realize I had been playing a longer game all along. Our second wedding anniversary should have been a happy day, but with Margaret, I knew better than to hope. She decided to host a family dinner, claiming she wanted to honor all the marriages in the family. I went along, keeping my polite face on, the same mask I had been wearing for months. Inside, though, I was already bracing myself. The evenings started the way they always did, with Margaret bustling around, making sure everything was perfect for her sons and their wives. After dinner, she clapped her hands together and announced she had gifts to celebrate love and commitment. Samantha and Chloe practically leaned forward in their seats, already expecting something special. Margaret handed each of them large boxes. Samantha tore hers open first, pulling out a sleek designer hand. Chloe followed, gasping as she lifted a gold necklace out of a velvet case. Both of them squealed, hugging Margaret like she had just given them the world. Margaret soaked it in, smiling like a queen rewarding her favorites. Then she turned to me and Ryan. She set a small bag on the table in front of me, the kind you'd see by the checkout counter at a discount store. My chest tightened as I reached inside and pulled out a plain, cheap candle, the label still crooked on the glass. It looked like something grabbed in a rush for a few dollars. Margaret tilted her head, smirking. "Well, it suits her," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room chuckled, Samantha and Chloe exchanging smug looks as they admired their expensive gifts. I sat frozen, the candle heavy in my hands, even though it couldn't have weighed more than a pound. My cheeks flushed, but this time I didn't feel small. I felt something else, sharp, steady, final. I lifted my eyes and locked them on Margaret. She held my stare, still smiling, as if daring me to protest. For the first time, I didn't look away. I didn't hide the way my jaw clenched, or the way my fingers tightened around the glass. In that long, quiet moment, it was like we both understood something had shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply placed the candle back in the bag and set it down carefully in front of me. Outwardly, I stayed calm, but inside I made my decision. I was done waiting, done swallowing every insult, done letting her think she had the power to humiliate me without consequence. Margaret turned her attention back to Samantha and Chloe, basking in their gratitude, but I barely heard them. My mind was already moving, pulling together every ounce of planning I had been storing. I thought about the money, the property, the secret foundation I had built while she was busy tearing me down. By the end of that dinner, one thing was clear. Margaret thought she had won. But I knew better. The time for patience was over. My plan was ready. After the anniversary dinner, I knew I had to take control of the next family gathering. Christmas was coming, and before Margaret could claim it for herself, I offered to host at our house. She hesitated, probably worried I wouldn't do it well, but finally agreed. I could hear the doubt in her voice, and that only made me more determined. I threw myself into preparing. Every free moment outside of work was spent planning, cooking, and decorating. I poured my savings into making sure everything looked and felt perfect. The tree stood tall in the corner, covered in elegant ornaments and warm light. The table was set with fine dishes and candles, nothing cheap or careless. I wrapped gifts for everyone, each one chosen carefully and tied with ribbons that matched the colors of the season. Ryan noticed the effort, but didn't question it. He thought I just wanted to impress his family. He didn't know the full truth, that every detail was part of something bigger I had been waiting to show. When the Johnson family arrived on Christmas Eve, I greeted them at the door with a calm smile. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh bread filled the house. Margaret walked in, her eyes scanning everything. She gave a little laugh, saying, "Well, this is nice. Didn't know you had it in you." I could hear the edge of jealousy under her words, but I didn't let it bother me. I smiled, thanked her, and moved on. Samantha and Chloe gasped over the decorations, asking where I bought the garlands and complimenting the food as it was served. Even the brothers looked impressed, piling their plates high and praising the meal. Margaret, though, couldn't resist her digs. She pointed at the cranberry sauce and said, "A bit too tart, don't you think?" She smirked at the centerpiece, adding, "A little much for such a small home." Normally, those words would sting. But this time, I just kept smiling, nodding politely as though her comments rolled right past me. Inside, I felt calm, almost untouchable. The evening went on, full of laughter, food, and chatter. For the first time, I didn't feel small in their presence. I moved through the night with quiet confidence, watching Margaret grow restless as her usual power over me slipped away. She didn't know what was coming. After the plates were cleared and everyone had settled in the living room with their drinks, I stood up. My heart was steady, my voice clear. "I have a little surprise for everyone," I said. The room grew quiet, all eyes turning to me. Margaret raised her eyebrows, clearly skeptical, but I didn't flinch. I looked around at each of them, my hands resting calmly at my sides. They thought Christmas was ending with full stomachs and shiny decorations. They had no idea the real show was just about to begin. I walked to the corner of the room where the gifts were stacked neatly under the tree. Each box was wrapped in shimmering paper with bows tied perfectly on top. I lifted them carefully, one by one, and began handing them out. The room grew excited, the way families always do when it's time to open presents. Samantha was the first to tear hers open. She peeled back the paper and gasped as she pulled out a pair of sleek black designer heels. "Oh my God, Emily," she said, her voice full of surprise. "These are gorgeous." She held them up to the light, the shine catching everyone's eye. Chloe leaned forward, eager to open hers next. Her box revealed a pair of elegant nude pumps, the kind you'd see in glossy store windows. "These are amazing," Chloe said, running her fingers along the smooth leather. She looked at me with real admiration for the first time, her usual smirk gone. The brothers leaned over to get a look, impressed by the quality. Even Ryan blinked, not knowing when I had bought such expensive gifts. I just smiled, calm and steady, keeping my focus on the last box waiting to be opened. Margaret reached for hers, her fingers tugging at the ribbon with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. She peeled back the paper slowly, then lifted the lid. For a moment, she said nothing. Her hand froze over the box, her smile fading as she looked inside. There, nestled in tissue paper, sat a pair of old sneakers. The fabric was faded, the soles worn down, the laces frayed. They weren't random shoes. They were mine, an old pair I had worn years ago, saved for this exact moment. The silence spread across the room. Everyone stared at the box, then at me. Margaret's face flushed red, her lips pressed tight. Before she could speak, I leaned forward slightly, my voice sweet and clear. "I thought I'd return the thoughtful gesture you gave me last year, Margaret," I said, keeping my eyes locked on her. "Remember those used shoes you gave me on my birthday? I kept them. I wanted to share how much they meant to me." The room stayed still, the weight of my words sinking in. Samantha's hand flew to her mouth, trying to hold back laughter. Chloe looked down, shoulders shaking as she struggled not to giggle. The brothers shifted awkwardly, their eyes darting between Margaret and me. Margaret's hands hovered over the sneakers, but she didn't touch them. Her face was a mix of anger and embarrassment, her pride cracking in front of the very family she had always controlled. I sat back in my chair, smiling politely, as if I had just given her the most ordinary gift in the world. But deep down, I knew I had just delivered the first blow she would never forget. The room was still quiet, the old sneakers sitting in front of Margaret like a shadow she couldn't ignore. I let the silence linger for a moment before I spoke again, my voice steady. "There's something else I want to share tonight," I said, folding my hands in my lap. Something I've been working on for a while. All eyes turned toward me, the air heavy with curiosity. Even Ryan sat straighter, not sure what was coming. I took a breath and continued. Over the past year, I've been saving and investing. And a few months ago, I bought a property. Then another. 2 homes, both in my name. I spoke calmly, not raising my voice, not bragging, just laying down the truth. The reaction was instant. Samantha's mouth dropped open. Chloe let out a small gasp. One of the brothers muttered, "No way," under his breath. Ryan turned to me slowly, his eyes wide, like he had never really seen me before. I looked at him then, my expression soft but firm. "And I want to thank you, Ryan," I said. "Thank you for not standing up for me all those times. Thank you for keeping quiet, because it pushed me to stand on my own feet. I had to rely on myself, and now I know I always can." Ryan's face paled, his lips parting as though he wanted to argue, but no words came out. He just sat there, speechless, caught between shock and guilt. Margaret, though, was the one who looked the most shaken. Her skin lost its color, and for once, she had nothing quick to say. The authority she always wore like armor seemed to crumble in front of everyone. She had spent years treating me like I was less, and now the truth was laid bare. I had built something on my own, something stronger than her gold bracelets or designer bags. Finally, she tried to recover. She forced a laugh, though it sounded thin and weak. "You didn't need to embarrass me like this," she said, her voice strained. She tried to make it sound as if I had overreacted, as if she were still in control. But the damage was done. No one was laughing with her. The family sat in silence, their eyes shifting uncomfortably. Samantha and Chloe glanced at each other but stayed quiet, for once without smug smiles. Ryan stared down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. Margaret's power had always come from belittling me, from making everyone else laugh at my expense. But in that moment, the laughter was gone. All that was left was the sight of a woman who had underestimated me, and the weight of her own humiliation pressing down on her. I didn't need to raise my voice or gloat. I had already won. Margaret sat stiff in her chair, the old sneakers still in front of her, her face tight with anger and shame. The silence stretched long enough that I knew it was my turn to finish what I had started. I leaned forward slightly, my tone calm but firm. "Respect is something earned," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "Not handed down with gold bracelets or expensive gifts. You don't get to decide my worth. Not anymore." Her lips pressed together, but she didn't argue. The room stayed still, no one daring to laugh or cut in this time. I could feel the shift, the way the balance of power had cracked. For the first time, I wasn't the one on the outside. I was the one in control. That night, after the family left, I sat with Ryan. He didn't know where to start. He looked guilty, embarrassed, but also unsure of what to say. Finally, he muttered, "I didn't know you were doing all that." I nodded, my voice steady. "Because you weren't paying attention. You never stood up for me, right? I had to stand up for myself." He lowered his head, the truth cutting deeper than any argument I could have made. In the weeks that followed, I made a choice. I was done begging for Margaret's acceptance, done showing up to dinners where I'd be mocked, done pretending I needed her approval. Ryan and I packed our things and moved into one of the homes I had bought. I made it clear to him, if he wanted our marriage to last, he would have to decide where his loyalty stood. No more silence, no more excuses. Ryan tried harder after that, stepping in when Margaret called, refusing to let her treat me the same way. But the damage between us was there. Our relationship was uncertain, and for the first time, I didn't feel afraid of that. I wasn't dependent on him anymore. If he stayed, it would be because he truly wanted to. If he left, I knew I would still stand strong. As for Samantha and Chloe, they never said anything out loud, but I could see it in their faces. The smirks were gone, replaced by something closer to admiration. They had laughed at me for so long, but when I showed my strength, I caught them watching me with respect they couldn't hide. Maybe they realized that Margaret's approval wasn't worth as much as they thought. Margaret never forgot that Christmas. She tried to act like nothing had happened, but she no longer looked me in the eye the same way. Her control over me was gone. She couldn't humiliate me anymore, not when I had already shown her how little power she truly had. I walked away from her games, my head high. I wasn't the scapegoat of the family any longer. I was the woman who turned their humiliation into strength, who built something of her own when no one believed in. For the first time since marrying into that family, I finally felt free.